You've managed for a couple of years now. You know how to build growth plans for engineers and you know how to have difficult conversations. You can effectively run the backlog and delivery of your team and make sure that you deliver high quality software. You can both identify staffing gaps in your team as well as figure out what you need to do to fill them. And you've done the phone screen so much that you can do it in your sleep. And now you're being asked to step up and take a couple of other managers under your belt and have them start reporting to you. You're going to go from being a manager of ICs to being a manager of managers. Today, we're going to talk about what you can expect with that move, and we're going to talk about what you can do to set yourself up for success there. Let's go. There's a few different things that go into the jump from managing ICs to managing managers. And over the next couple of episodes, we're going to talk about these things in a little bit more detail. To kick us off, I wanted to get us straight to the core of the matter, which is how will your life change and what will be different immediately when you go from just managing ICs to also managing managers. The perhaps obvious point about this shift is up until this point, managers have been your peers, but you will have had individual contributors working for you. Now, all of a sudden, managers are your direct reports. And in fact, maybe some of your old peers are all of a sudden reporting into you. I think everybody who's been a manager for a while understands that what you've gotten yourself into is not a promotion in the traditional sense, it's a change of careers. When you start managing managers, what's interesting is this is really the first time that you're then charged with teaching this craft to somebody else. And as anybody who's taught anything knows, the best way to learn something really well yourself is to be forced to teach it. So at the point where you're managing managers might be the first time where you have to seriously reflect on your management craft. So now, not only do you have the careers of individual contributors as your responsibility, you have the success of managers working for you as your responsibility as well. And your job is to grow them and challenge them as you deliver on the objectives of your organization and make your customers happy. There's a couple of different dimensions that this change can be felt on. In many situations, the managers that work for you will be more senior than the engineers that may have worked for you before, especially as in some organizations, senior engineers tend to report into more senior managers. You will also have people who have other people working for them reporting to you, meaning that when you have a one-on-one or when you think about somebody on your team, you can't purely think about them. You have to reflect on the entire team that they run. And finally, those people have organizations with outcomes that you are accountable for, meaning that you now go from having probably one team working for you to having an entire department of multiple teams working for you. And it's really this indirection and the leverage that enables, but also the trickiness of managing this well that will be the first challenge for you. Because there's a trade-off between leaning in too much and really taking the life out of the managers that work for you and not leaning in enough and losing track of what makes your organization great. Another thing that's going to change is the expectations on you. So while you are responsible for your organization's output, it's very likely that your boss is now going to start looking for you to deliver outcomes. In general, when you climb in an organization, when you have a more senior job, you're going to learn that the higher up you get, the less output matters and the more outcomes matter. Meaning, when you're very junior, when you're very new, it might be about performing a task in the correct way that you've been asked to perform it. But the more senior you get, the more that is taken for granted that you can do those things. And it becomes less about doing the thing in the right way and more about doing the right things. Becoming a manager of managers, in particular when that implies becoming a director, is really one of those real step changes in your career where outcomes start mattering more than output. In most organizations, there's still a ton of managerial support above the director level, meaning that you're not in a place where you make a mistake and you're going to be ousted from the organization in any way. But it's still a meaningful shift very likely your boss is going to have such a wide gamut of responsibilities, and they're going to have so many things on their plate that they can't dive in and look at the output of everything that's happening in your organization. Instead, they're going to look at the outcomes that you produce. You're going to set goals and you're going to align on strategy together, and then you will be expected to and accountable for delivering on those outcomes. So it's a big shift that is enabled by the indirection and the levers that you now have in your organization. Let's talk about a couple of different things that will feel different for you now that you're managing managers. Let's talk output. One of the things probably that made you successful as a manager was that you were able to get your teams to deliver really great software with all of the ways that you managed to do that. You hire good people, you create an environment where they can do their best, you remove roadblocks, you do all of those things. And by doing that, you get them to deliver great software that your customer loves. The way this changes when you start managing managers is that you're not only accountable still for delivering great software, but you're also accountable for folks on your team running teams that deliver great software. That means that you need to both be able to assess the output of folks that work for you, and you need to be able to eliminate roadblocks at a greater scale for them to enable them to move fast. Let me give you like a super concrete example here. Maybe some of the rituals that you've had as a manager of individual contributors have been things like stand-ups and sprint plannings and demos. And you've understood output for your team by a combination of those rituals, as well as doing code reviews, maybe contributing code yourself, doing one-on-ones, and having a really 360 perspective of your organization. Now that you're handing the reins of that off to somebody else, how do you get the same level of comfort and grounding that the team is doing great things? Well, first of all, it's like you're not going to get the same level of grounding. You're going to have to develop trust for the people that work for you. But you can't rescind control entirely either, because if you do that, you lose so much good mentoring opportunity. You lose so many good opportunities to be connected to your organization, and you are well on the way to develop what I would think of as being a pointy-haired boss, like you lose touch with what's going on the ground. So you need to find mechanisms to plug in, but you can't really go to every stand-up anymore, at least when you get to a certain amount of new direct reports. And at those stand-ups, things that you did before, which would have been to lean in and give direction and say, do this or do that, it's going to be much more problematic now, because you might be undercutting the person that's actually running the team for you. So one of the problems here is you have to get the signals that you need to get, and you have to be present, but you can't do it in a way that undercuts somebody that works for you. I find things like demos are still super useful. Following along with pull requests, going to architectural meetings, finding real points of indirection where you can plug yourself in and understand what's happening. Using the software that your team is building sounds like a trivial point, but it's pretty important, and hopefully you're already doing that. Then you also need to learn how to listen without giving guidance, and how to listen without saying we need to do this or that, and save that for being able to empower the people that work for you. So say that you should go to a stand-up, and it's a disaster. Like the team doesn't figure out what they're supposed to do. They prioritize the wrong things. It drags on for ages, and they don't really get to consensus. And you might start scratching your face in frustration. In most cases, unless you're in the middle of a critical incident or this is something that is extremely important, you're better off letting it run and then talking to your manager afterwards and working together with that person to analyze why that stand-up was bad and what they need to do to sort it out, rather than lean in and intervene yourself. Both for the reason that you would be undercutting the manager if you leaned in, but also because you wouldn't be giving them an opportunity to train and learn the tools that made you effective. So if understanding output is one thing, the next thing is to increase velocity of output. What that means is, so if you have 4 or 5 people working for you that run teams, how can you empower them? How can you remove roadblocks? And how can you drive improvement in their organizations and their teams so that your organization can get a higher output, higher velocity? So one of the things that tend to happen here is that if things are working well, then your teams will be on a continuous improvement trajectory all by themselves. it'll be in their best interest to move faster. So they'll be doing retrospectives and they will be introspecting their process and their methods and all of the things that they do so that they can move faster. But there are both levers that are outside of their control and synergies that they might not see on the individual team level that needs to come to you so that you can figure out which of these to attack and where the solution is a group solution or where the problem might be a group problem, but the solution are individual teams. There will also be times where they will come to you with problems that are very cross-functional in nature. It might be that there's something that the marketing team or the sales team is doing that is causing your teams to slow down, but folks that work for you aren't empowered to solve those things for either hierarchical reasons or cultural reasons. Generally, at the level you're now at, there's quite a few more questions that are buck stoppers with you, meaning that you can't just go to your boss and expect them to go to the sales team and figure this out. Instead, your boss is going to expect you to be able to take some of those roadblocks and remove them, or at least try to do it before you have to escalate it. So that's really what it means to then build output. You can also think about building output and creating velocity more strategically in terms of training your managers, switching out your team and hiring stronger managers, looking at the skill composition that you have relative to the skill composition that you need. Like if you're turning into machine learning and you're having to go down that route, then some of the highest leverage moves that you can make is starting to look at data and ML as capabilities to build in your organization. And it's very likely that now you're going to have much more remit and control over your budget and headcount, and thus expected to be able to make those types of moves. Hey there. So while I was editing the clips for this episode yesterday, I realized there's just way too much content for us to take in one sitting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this into 2 episodes, and what you've just seen is the first episode, and then come next week, we'll publish the continuation of this. I hope that gives you a little bit more digestion and something exciting to look out to. I'll see you around.